Hi, welcome to Swishing Mindsets. This is Anuradha, and today I'm speaking to Dr. Wallace J Nichols, marine biologist and author of Blue Mind: How Water Makes You Happier, More Connected, and Better at What You Do. Hello, Dr. Nichols. How are you?
Hi, Anuradha. I'm so glad you reached out to have this conversation. It's great to be
Yes,
with you.
absolutely. I said, like I told you, I was thrilled that we connected on LinkedIn. So, and you're speaking to us from California right now, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, wonderful. So I'll first of all, I'll just read out something from your book, and then maybe you can explain what Blue Mind is really. So what you've said written here is that it's a mildly meditative state characterized by calm, peacefulness, unity, and a sense of general happiness and satisfaction with life in the moment. And it is inspired by water and elements associated with water, from the color blue to the words we use to describe the sensations associated with immersion. It takes advantage of neurological connections formed over millennia, many such brain patterns and preferences being discovered only now, thanks to innovative scientists and cutting edge technology. So, this is a phrase that we're not very familiar with, blue mind. But the minute you read this, you understand, oh, okay, it's water and our connection with it. Yeah. So, if you can, tell us what blue mind is, what it means for you specifically.
Yeah, so it is just a simple phrase that explains something that's very familiar, very intuitive. It's our emotional connection with water. And it's a feeling and an idea that it crosses every culture and all human history, all spiritual traditions, all sacred texts refer to not just hydration and hygiene, but this emotional connection with water. And like you read, science is catching up and starting to describe it in more detail and the therapeutic benefits that work for each of us and work for our families and the teams that we work with. And so basically, it's a phrase that refers to something that's really familiar. Um, and it's probably easiest to understand blue mind if we start with red mind, which is our new normal, where we're working hard, we're striving and thriving and grinding and trying to meet our goals, and we have technology everywhere and to-do lists, and we forget to sleep or we don't sleep enough, and then we caffeinate and keep going. And red mind is very, very useful. It is how we escape trouble and how we work hard and how we, compete and reach goals. But if it's all we have, we will burn out. And I call that gray mind. And gray mind isn't very useful, except that it's your body and your mind telling you they're done and it's time for a timeout. So we want to avoid gray mind. We want to avoid burnout and breakdown and everything that goes with it, the despondency and the languishing and even the mild depression that you can feel when you're burnt out, or worse even. So we're at our best when we move between this thing I call blue mind and red mind, back and forth appropriately. A little more red when you need it, a little more blue when you need it. And water is the source of blue mind. And I include all of nature in that definition because all of the plants, all of the grasses and the trees and the shrubs and the animals, even ourselves, we're mostly water. We're from water, we're made out of water, we go back to the water, we live because there's water. So blue mind extends to nature, but also, as you mentioned in that quote, the color. So when we see that color in art, works of art, or when we use water metaphors or nature metaphors in poetry, in prose, in songs, it soothes us. So I'm pretty ecumenical about water. As you can see, it's water in any form, and that can be wild flowing water or embodied water in the form of another being or a plant, or metaphorical water in the form of um, language and metaphors, uh, or virtual water, which is what I refer to all the arts, all of the artwork and music about water, recordings about water. And it calms us and centers us and soothes us. It also connects us to each other. when you're at the water with someone you care about or someone you're getting to know. It's nice. The conversation flows, sitting by a fountain or by a river. And so it turns out this idea is really important from the beginning to the end of our lives, from birth all the way through death. Of course, we all come out of the water.
Yeah,
We're
the
all,
womb, you've mentioned the womb is it's almost like we are in the water, yeah.
yeah, the womb is our first ocean, Mother Ocean.
Right.
Our mother is our first ocean, and we spent 9.21 months in there on average, some a little more, some a little less. Uh, and we come out into this world, and we still have this water connection for really good reasons, because it's the source of life. So nurturing that all the way throughout our lives, as we grow, as we mature, as we take on more responsibility and more stress, we need it even more so. And then later in life, when we start to feel the weight of gravity more, we can use water therapeutically. And that's really good to remember. Or at any point in your life when you experience a physical setback. I know a lot of people, especially athletes, but really anybody of any age can do rehab in water, in pools. It's safer and easier than battling gravity on land.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
at the end of life, we often memorialize our loved ones. And when I say we, humanity, we go to the water to memorialize our loved ones, to release them in their physical form, and I spread my mom's ashes over her beloved Big Hole River in Montana after she passed. And the that's a tradition that crosses all cultures. And then we love to go back to the water to think fondly about those we've lost. And so there's that aspect as well. We go to the water, the edge of the water, for all kinds of ceremonies throughout our lives. And so I just wanted to put some science and practice behind this idea that we call Blue Mind. And that's been I think it's really helped a lot of people to have a name for something they always felt and they always knew. And then to do it more and to prioritize their Blue Mind practice. And that's what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the minute you're aware of it, then the chances are that you'll do more of it. You prioritize it. Because we
That's
all
right.
know that, everybody says that, oh, you're on a holiday, you think of the beach, you think of going to the water, but you don't necessarily think of it as something therapeutic.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even when you can't take a break, when it's the middle of the week or you've got a lot going on, you can still practice Blue Mind. People say, well, I don't live near water. What do I do? And usually when they say that, I pull out the map and we find a lot of water that's near them. So what they're saying is, I don't live near a beautiful ocean or a big lake or a giant river, but we're all not far from water. And so it can be a little creek or a pond or a fountain or a bath, a shower. And you can practice Blue Mind really wherever you are and take a mindful shower. And I challenge people to give it a shot. Next time you take a shower, pay closer attention to how you feel and try to feel every drop of water on the back of your head. Just try for 30 seconds and see if it makes the shower a little bit better. I do want to say, if water is scarce where you are, please practice water conservation. That's another form of a mindful shower, is to be mindful of your water consumption and to be careful with wasting water, but to enjoy it and really pay attention to the emotional benefits of the water.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned mindfulness, and of course, part of mindfulness is that, you experience every sensation on your body, in your mind, as the water hits your body, I suppose. And so tell me, uh, Blue Mind is also associated with mindfulness. And as you mentioned in your book as well, that when we think of mindfulness, it's not a blank state, right? It's not a blank state. Blank state is, I suppose, what you call your gray mind, when you're pretty much you're stuck, you're stagnant. So it's
Numb.
not a
Yeah.
blank state, but being in the presence of water, which is moving, it's kind of it's a cure for mind wandering, right? Which is what mindfulness is supposed to be kind of a cure for. So could you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So, some people, if you talk about mindfulness meditation, they stop listening or they're not interested. It's gotten more and more popular around the world, but the reality is when you step up to the water, it does some of the work for us. It puts us into a mindful state. You step up to the water, and generally, all you can hear is the sound of the water. If it's a flowing river, or if there are waves, or if it's a fountain. And that sound kind of precludes some of the noise. And so sometimes sleeping at night, people put on the sound of the ocean, the sound of the rain, or the sound of the river, partly to block out noise, but also because it calms and soothes us and puts us into this blue mind or more mindful state. What also happens is visually, when you're at the edge of the water, your world is simplified. And throughout our days, we have a lot of visual information that we're taking in. Even if we don't realize it, there are signs and billboards, there are screens, there are faces. Each of those faces is sharing information about how they're doing. There's just a lot. There's architecture, the built environment. So you combine that with the sound, and the world's a busy place. Even when you're sitting in your office, it might be slightly relaxing, but there's a lot going on. So at the edge of the water, you get the soundscape and the viewscape are simplified, and that gives you some bandwidth back. But you don't just fall asleep, right? Like you said, it's not a blank slate. Your mind shifts into a different place, and this, we call it mindfulness, and where we can focus better. And it's also a place for creativity to occur. So if your goal is to just really be calm, Blue Mind can help you with that. But we've also seen that when people want to calm their minds in order to boost their creativity, you can take that intention into your practice. And a lot of artists and musicians and even entrepreneurs say they got their best ideas while sitting by the water, or maybe while swimming and listening to water, which is pretty fascinating. And it's a good tool to put to use. Then, of course, when we get in the water, we're getting a whole other somatic experience and releasing, or it's a release from gravity. People describe being in the water as a hug, whether it's a warm hug or a cold hug, still a hug. And you feel held and buoyed up. Of course, doing it at the level of your skill set. If you're not comfortable going underwater, then just being in the shallow water or in a bathtub. But if you're a confident swimmer, then there are more options. So that is another place that we get the support. And so floating, the ultimate Blue Mind experience would be floating in a dark, quiet place where you're very comfortable and the water is warm and you're just drifting off into your mind. And, it's like a sensory deprivation float tank, or people use those to achieve that. But you can also do it in a swimming pool. Or I was swimming yesterday, and there's a little neck float that I put on. And at the end of my exercise, I just put my head back and floated and closed my eyes and just had a few minutes of Blue Mind. And even the working out was Blue Mind in a way, but there was some red mind mixed in because I was counting my repetitions and I had exercise goals in the pool. But at the end, I always love to just turn that all off, stop exercising, put that float on, lean back, close my eyes, and really relax. And so all of those aspects come together, and we have this blue mindfulness experience that is extremely healthy, not just for our bodies, but also for our minds.
Yeah, and you've also described in your book the flotation device and the sensory deprivation, where you said you didn't know whether your eyes were open or not because it was so dark and you water all around you. That was beautiful. And you've also said that, it's being used a lot in Sweden. That's one place. And since your book came out, I'm sure it's more popular. And you said that it's been used in cases of PTSD, depression, etc., and it really helps. So, could you tell us how that helps?
Yeah, so referring to that feeling of when you're in a float
Yeah, the
tank,
floating, yeah, the
it's
flotation.
a it's a not only you don't know if your eyes are open or closed. What happens to me sometimes is I don't know. I feel like if I'm floating like this with my arms up, and then I bring them down by my side, it feels like my arms have passed through my body and have gone around and come out. It's you really disconnect. The point is, you really disconnect from your physical body in ways that most people haven't experienced unless they've done a lot of serious meditating and have a practice that gets them there. So it's the water again does some of that work, and the darkness and the quiet. And what the researchers, there's a team of researchers that have really been focusing specifically on therapy. And what they found is that it's as good or than everything been used for post-traumatic stress, anxiety disorders, even mild depression. And I don't want to say that it's a substitute because I think
Yeah, absolutely.
those are very serious concerns, and we should use all proven approaches. But what we're seeing is floating in water, uh, as simple as it sounds, is very good, particularly for eating disorders related to anxiety, because there's again that connection to your body, that body dysmorphia. You get a break from that. Your mind and your body just disconnect, and you get a break from that particular set of misguided emotional responses to your body that can be very dangerous. So there's a guy named Justin Feinstein. If you're interested in the published research, go to Google Scholar or something like that and look up Justin Feinstein and his research on therapy. And it's powerful and potentially well, it's already very useful and potentially life-saving. Yeah.
What does it say? Could you tell us a bit?
Well, he had a team in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Laureate Institute for Brain Research, and he was able to set up I would say the world's best float tank, big and round, and then had all of the technology able to study people before they floated in an fMRI in a brain scan, uh, during the flotation, and then after. And interestingly, the Institute had a whole section of the Institute focused on anxiety disorders and another whole section focused on post-traumatic stress. So he had a group of people that he could work with, not only fellow researchers, but outpatients who could come and have the treatments and then have the control of the people who weren't going through the float therapy. They also set up as a control for the experiment a quiet, dark room with an extremely comfortable reclining chair. So with a mask on and in earplugs. So some people got that treatment, which was just a relaxing, quiet, dark room, and then others got the float-based treatment. And the results were very clear that um, floating is a really good healing modality. It's a really, really powerful tool for the cases that I mentioned, but also for just mild stress. and mild anxiety. You don't have to be in the category of having a disorder, a diagnosed disorder. Uh, you can all of us can benefit. In addition to that, I found it's a great place to take if you're creatively stuck, it's a great place to take that. Um, so a lot of high stress individuals um, with careers that are high stress have adopted floating to help with that. And a lot of people who have creative careers have adopted that. And the um, the research is ongoing. So if you're interested in float therapy in particular, keep an eye on Justin Feinstein's work. He has an org called the Float Research Collective, and I think their website is floatresearchcollective.org, where they continue to update all of the studies that are ongoing and have been published.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and thank you for sharing. I'll look that up. And you also explained, the science behind it. And since the brain, like you said, it's over 70% water. And so could you explain what happens to the brain when it's in front of water, how it helps? If you could, give us a
Yeah,
science
so it's
behind it.
not. I would say it's a more than the brain. Our entire body. It's our whole nervous system. So on a really simple level, what we see is that um, when we step up to the water, our heart rate starts to slow and our breathing rate starts to slow. We see in an experiment that I was involved in at an aquarium, um, we saw that skin temperature and self-reported wellness, skin temperature cooled and self-reported wellness went up, along with a slowed heart rate and a slowed breathing rate. All of the things you're trying to achieve when you want to be more calm. So all the the standard metrics of um, calmness, from a physiological perspective. And other research has shown that cortisol levels, stress hormones in these kinds of activities drop, and those can be measured not both in a blood sample, but also in saliva. So we see the indicators of stress across the board decrease. Um, Before things got higher tech, we had to rely on just asking people how they felt. And of course, the research that relies more on questionnaires and surveys and narratives and scoring um, your emotional well-being. Those are all really clear as well. I think some of the interesting studies that are underway right now are more long-term and looking at larger populations of people engaged in blue mind activities such as surf therapy or float therapy, but looking at it over the long term. So it's one thing to say you can go to the water, you can get out, you feel better, you can conclude that. It's another thing to look at how this impacts us over the long term. So that's where it starts to get really interesting from a public health perspective, and allows us to put Blue Mind into our toolkit with some long-term studies, and those are underway right now and are looking pretty promising. Yeah.
Yeah, and you yourself have put in a lot of work on it because I saw that, you for your college research you wanted to get funded, but they said it was too vague or something like that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
over the years, I mean, I don't know, I think decades of work you've put into it. So, what are you out to achieve, and how much have you achieved? What is the difference around you, the awareness levels now? What do you see now? You hold a lot of workshops also, I see. So, with at
Yes.
an individual level, at a level of, the corporate level, what is it that you're talking about?
Well, I think what we've achieved over the past decade is, like you said, when we first started working on Blue Mind, there was a lot of eyeball rolling, and it sounded, you know, kind of hippy dippy or woo woo or whatever terminology people when they roll their eyes. Uh, and over time, time, the research that's been flowing in is tremendous. And since I wrote the book Blue Mind, back then I was doing a lot of dot connecting. There were a few studies, there were analogous studies, so your brain on music, your brain on mindfulness, that I could rely on those as analogs to Blue Mind. So I had to do a lot of dot connecting and kind of creating the hypothesis or the theory.
Yeah, so this is
Fast
2011 your book came out, right?
It came out in 2014, and I
2014.
started it back in 2011. So it was a
Okay, okay. Yeah,
quite a number of years of work. And we did our
yeah.
first Blue Mind Summit in 2011 to
Okay.
bring together neuroscientists and water experts to ask
Mm.
new sets of questions. Um, and so in the past decade, or over a decade, really, the research has started to catch up with the idea. Um, there's a realm called blue health research that people at the University of Exeter Medical School have pioneered. They've got a tremendous number of publications that keep flowing out of their um, very multidisciplinary program. And that's just one example of the different research centers that have opened up and are thriving um, and trying to figure out how this actually works in the real world. So how do we apply Blue Mind in the workplace? How do we apply it to kids? How do we bring it into schools? How do we put it in the hands of nurses, therapists, doctors, and healthcare practitioners? What is a dose of Blue Mind? What does that look like? So that's all underway, and it's showing up in all kinds of ways, depending on the healthcare system. You know, there are different approaches, as you might imagine, depending on how insurance companies view it. In the UK, it's more common to have things like walking by the water prescribed by your healthcare professional.
Yeah, I was just
Because
going to ask, I mean, do you prescribe a dose of Blue Mind? So that's
yeah, well, it
interesting.
depends
Yeah.
on where you are. I would. I
Yeah.
think the I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't have that at my disposal, but I do work with people to create something I call bluescription, which is basically a formal kind of interview that we do, a process, and we do it in a workshop. I'm going to Baltimore to do a workshop tomorrow. The It's a process that we go through to really figure out who are you, where are you, what do you like, what are you good at, and how can we take that and create a bluescription that works for you. Otherwise, I can make a recommendation that you go to a float spa and you'll say, we don't have one. Next. And I say, well, go surfing. Well, I'm not near the ocean. Well, so it really works best if we create a bluescription that's more bespoke. And it's a process that I go through with people, sometimes individually or in a group. And they end up with a pretty good plan to try to do Blue Mind in some form every day for 23 minutes. And that may mean a combination of things, like a mindful shower, listening, instead of listening to the news, listening to the sound of water. It may mean a walk to a bridge and just pausing there. It may mean a swim or a paddle or some exercise related to water, or a walk in the forest or in a park, because all those trees are made of water. So there's a long list of things that one can do, but they don't work for everyone. So the idea is to figure out what works for you, how you might practice it regularly, making it a new habit. And I found that once people hear this idea, so if somebody is completely new to Blue Mind, they're listening to this conversation, you can't unremember it. So it's part of you forever. So every time you see water, even if it's a painting or a fountain, it will remind you how that water, how valuable that water is to your cognitive, emotional, psychological, social, and spiritual well-being, not only to your physical, well-being through hydration and hygiene, and not only to the ecological health or economic health of society, but to your personal blue mind well-being. And once you have that kind of as part of you, you can start to make decisions that to remind yourself, oh, I should take a blue mind break. If you're at work, it might be a little bit harder, but there may be a fountain that you can go to and sit near during a lunch break, whether it's in the building where you work or in the town or city. There may be a wild waterway that you can prioritize spending time by on your way to work or on your way home. And then there are things you can bring into the built environment to enhance it. So biophilic design, bringing plants and fountains and nature artwork, photography, and then doing things on the weekends with your coworkers sometimes that could work, encouraging each other. And so I've seen Blue Mind put into practice across nonprofits, schools, of course, individuals in their households, but also businesses taking on this concept and integrating it into their wellness programs.
Yeah. And you also said that, talking about nature, that we are made of the same elements, really, in
Yeah,
our
the idea
bodies.
that
And yeah.
yeah, the idea that we're disconnected from nature is kind of a new one for humanity, and it's increasingly true. We isolate more, and we are using technology more. And um, I was just reading a post, blog entry by a guy who exercises a lot outside with his kids, and he was just explaining how when we take the screens away and they're indoors, they get bored, and after they get bored, they go outside. And so the boredom always I can remember from my childhood when I felt bored, I usually ended up putting on whatever I needed to put on and going out the door and going outside and doing something, sort of erasing the boredom by going out into the outdoors. Uh, but when we have a screen in our hands that precludes boredom and keeps us feeling like we're connected to everything, but we're just sitting in front of a screen, we tend to not go outside, and we're more disconnected from the natural world. And that's becoming more common. So the good thing about Blue Mind is once you start doing it, it's addictive in a good way. The feeling you get, like all those feel good neurochemicals that you feel, make you want to do it again, and make you want to maybe stretch a little more into a skill that you don't have. You might, well, I wish I was a better swimmer. I wish I knew how to kayak. I wish I knew how to dive. Or, wow, the float tank sounds interesting. Maybe a little scary at first, but I'm going to try that. So the challenge, it brings in a little bit of that red mind, because if you're only in blue mind, that's just not, it's not all that useful, right? It's really, you can be very relaxed, but not all that productive. So we need both, and challenging yourself is always a good way to do that.
Yeah, and you talked about kids, so I think you've done a lot with your kids as well, taking them near water and things. So how can parents do that? Because like you said, we're leading frantic lives wherever in the world
Yeah.
we may be. And like kids are also on the screen and parents are on the screen, and often there isn't much time. So how have you done it, and what do you recommend?
Yeah, if there's time for YouTube or TikTok or any of those other apps, then there's time. Those are not necessary. So even if it's 5 minutes, if your child or if you as a parent are spending 5 minutes on social media doing nothing really, that's ultimately forgettable, um, then there's 5 minutes to use. So if there's and if you're really, I do respect people lead busy lives in order to make a living, in order to keep the lights and the water and the roof and education going. I do respect that. But I do think there is time for Blue Mind in all of our lives. And it may be something really simple. But I think the first step is to talk about it. I work with a lot of kids and we talk about it. I give them blue marbles and as a gift. And then we talk about, how does water make you feel? Like, what's the water you love? And they all have a different answer. How does it make you feel? When did you first meet that water? Who took you there? What's its name? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And it might be a bathtub, or it could be a river, or it could be a park with plants, because they're aware that plants are made of water. And so getting the conversation going and then reminding them that for the rest of your life, you can access your blue mind. You can access your water when you need it. And you may need it to reduce your stress, to be calm, to reduce anxiety. You may need it to boost your creativity. You may need it to build a closer relationship with someone. And going to the water is a great way to make friends, to deepen friendships, to share activities. Along the way, it's romantic. It's almost a cliche that being by the water is romantic. So depending on the age of the kids, we'll talk about that, and the college
Yeah.
kids, Uh, so they learn that throughout their lives, they can practice Blue Mind. And it has all of these benefits. And so we start there. Let's explore where you might have those experiences. So with parents, it's the same thing. There are a few things on the list that they can do every day. And there are some that maybe you can do once a week or once a month. And then there are others that are maybe once a year. And then even others that might be a once in a lifetime kind of activity that you have to really save up your resources in order to do. And so it's a mix of all of that. But I think it all begins with the initial understanding, this conversation that we're having, thinking, oh, wow, I
Yeah.
get it. This seems like it's a priority. But I want to go back to the beginning of your question. I talk to a lot of young people, including my own. Fortunately, we still talk a lot, and they're both at college. And I ask groups of young people, how much time do you spend on social media or on your device in the day? And they have an answer, however many hours or minutes. And then I ask, okay, what is the most interesting thing that's happened on that little screen this week? Like really, really interesting, like memorable, maybe even unforgettable or useful in some way. Most of the time, they don't know.
Yeah, it's a blur, honestly. Yeah.
It's a blur. They have no
Yeah.
idea. And then I'll just let that answer sit there for a minute because on its own, on its face, it's more powerful than anything I can say, as the adult, trying to give advice. I just let that, I'll nod and listen. Wow. Wait. Let me remind you what you just told me. This group of people on average spends 3 hours a day. And some kids I've seen the reports, they're on their device during all waking hours in some way or another. And nothing happened that you can recall.
Yeah.
I just play it back to them. And that's a stunning observation. And it's so simple. And it turns out to be true. And if they try really hard, they can remember some silly video that they thought was really funny that they shared with their friend. And that's what they come up with. But nothing of lasting significance that builds them into better human being. And that's their own answer. That's not me telling them anything. They're just observing their own thoughts and activities. So I think that is at the base of the conversation, is that we do prioritize that. without any benefits from it or any apparent benefits to ourselves. The benefits go to the people making the content and selling our attention. So there is time probably for a little bit of blue mind, and the benefits of it are well documented. We are water beings living on a water-based planet, so it behooves us all to understand our own blue mind and practice it. It's not a niche conversation. It's all about water here on Earth. Lucky us, So we should understand that, value the water because of this kinds of conversation, and then return the favor, because the water needs our help everywhere. The water is in less good shape than it should be. And without getting into a long conversation
Yeah.
about the threats to water, we all know what they are, different
Right.
kinds of pollution. And so when you fall in love with water more, then maybe you work to protect it and restore it and fix the parts that need fixing. And that builds a stronger blue movement, builds a stronger community around caring for our public waters through that fixing the value equation, really.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned the blue marble. I love the analogy you gave in the beginning of the book, that these two fish are swimming along and another bigger fish swims past them and says, "How's the water?" And they're like, "What's water?" So, we are on this blue planet, this blue marble, and we're not aware. So you said that
That's
sometimes
right.
we need to be aware of it.
The reminders, I need to be reminded of these ideas. That's why I love doing podcasts, because I get to remind myself. Um, you get caught up in your red mind activities, and it's really easy to forget all of these ideas, and time goes by and then you burn out. And so being aware of the environment that we depend on, the water that we depend on, um, along with the air, the water, and the earth itself, that's what life is all built of. Throw in some sunlight, and pretty magical. So um, really embracing these ideas and reminding yourself, and that's what the blue marble does. Is it's just, I have one right here. If we were in the same room, I'd hand that to you
Oh,
right
it's
through, right?
beautiful. Yeah.
And
I
then
read
it's just
about that. That's so fascinating that you've just been giving it out and you said that the blue marble has to be passed on, even if it's just a picture on social media or something. So can we do our own versions? Because we can't get it
yeah,
from you. Everybody can't get
yeah.
one from you.
So if we were all in a room together, you would have received a blue marble exactly like this one. And I would say, can you hold it just like that at arm's length? So hold it out in
Yeah.
front of you and look at it.
Hmm.
And from a million miles away, looking back at Earth, that's what we look like. That's how big we look. That's the
Yeah.
size.
Tiny. Yeah.
Tiny and blue,
And blue.
because
Yeah. Blue. Yeah.
we're a water-based planet, fortunately for us. We wouldn't be here otherwise. And that's a humbling perspective to have. Most of the people who see the Earth from that view are called astronauts. Most of us will not be astronauts, so we get to do this exercise. So it's called the view effect among space aficionados, and everyone who's gone to space has come back kind of spiritually transformed, emotionally changed because of that perspective. So that's part of what we try to achieve in sharing a blue marble with people. And then if you take your blue marble and you look through it, go really up close. I'll see if I can do it on the camera. You get really close.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you imagine looking through that with your eye at a light, there's a lot of cracks and bubbles, and it feels like you've just immersed in water. And then, if we were in the room together, I would say, hold the marble to your forehead and think of someone that you want to say thank you to, that perhaps you haven't. Maybe they've made your life better in some way. Maybe they're the one who taught you to love your water or taught you to swim, or did something good to make the world a better place. And then we think about that person, and then we put the marble to our hearts, and we imagine passing our marble along to them and saying thank you along with this little gift and explaining what the gift means to you, some version of the story, and preferably embellished with your own thoughts, and putting the marble in their hand and asking them to carry it until they want to pass it on to someone they want to say thank you to. And so what we've seen is, as we give away marbles, people really enjoy getting them, but maybe they enjoy giving them away even more. And then they want to get another one so they can give away another one to another person to say thank you. And if it's right, I guess, if it's done with that set of intentions, these marbles get passed on and on and on. And it really cuts through the divisiveness, the cynicism, uh, the gloom about the environmental conditions that we're facing, helps connect people. And when I share blue marbles with a group full of people at a workshop in a room, it just gets very lively, and people share stories. When they, we'll do an exercise after I've explained what I've just have. I'll ask people in the room to turn when in the room and tell your water story, and then listen to their water story and exchange your marbles, and then maybe do it one more time with different people. And people just get really excited to talk about their water and exchange their marbles. And then maybe throughout if it's at a conference, I'll say, if you have the opportunity, say thank you to someone, trade your marbles. Just put yours in their hand and take theirs and introduce yourself, tell your story. And it's just a little sphere of recycled glass with almost no value, really, monetarily, but they become precious to people. And that alchemy is fascinating. How this beautiful, it is nice looking, but
Yes,
it really is,
absolutely. Yeah.
it's such a simple physical form, and it is made out of recycled glass. So it has not a lot of monetary value, but when you get one and then the story is attached to it, and then you trade it a couple times, now this thing has real value, not monetary value, but it's precious.
Yeah.
And that is analogous to what we need to do with our wild waters, with the waters that come into our homes. If we're undervaluing them right now, by having a better conversation and telling a better story, we can fix that value equation. People can begin to perceive the rivers and the lakes and the oceans and the water that we consume, that we bathe in, as more precious and sacred even. And that is a changing of that perceived value. So if we can do it so powerfully with a blue marble, I think we can do it with the bigger blue marble that's our earth. Yeah.
Yes. Tell me, Dr. Nichols, like finally, what is the change that you hope to see around you at the corporate level and otherwise, I mean, you've been working in this for so long and you're so clearly so passionate about it.
Well, the big goal, the big audacious goal, I would say, is I would like what we're talking about to be common knowledge, common practice for currently 8.1 billion people. So as the population grows, we'll increase that goal. But it to be common knowledge. I would like it to be not something that people learn and say, wow, that's surprising. And common knowledge is something you know, and you might not even know how you know it, but you just know it because it's the way we talk about things. It's the way you were raised. It's not only something you learn in school, but you learn at home and you learn from your friends. No kids would even become mature adults and not know about their blue mind and how to practice it and how to have access to it. So that's that goal. And how we get there is we have lots of conversations with everyone without excluding anyone. For political reasons, we try to, obviously translations are important. But if you're listening to this and you say, well, that's a good idea, I think I could incorporate that, please do. If you need marbles and books and some, find them. The book is available for free on my website. Marbles are increasingly difficult to find. Kids don't play with marbles so much, but find some and keep the conversation going. So we achieve that common knowledge goal. Of course, the people who will fuel that the most are the ones that have a stronger interest. So people in healthcare, nurses and teachers in particular seem to be sort of the frontline blue mind advocates. People who make boats, who make kayaks, who make surfboards, they're into it. Even people who make swimming pools, they're very interested in the true value of their product and service. So if you can see the connection between blue mind in your life work, invite you to take these ideas and run with them. On a much more kind of individual and personal level, I would say the next time you go practice blue mind, take somebody with you who needs it. Because we all know who that is. We all have someone in our community, in our lives, in our families that's stuck in their gray mind. And if this might help, that's a good thing. And so if you're saying, yeah, I already do that stuff and I love it, and thank you for affirming what I already knew. Well, congratulations, that's great. And take somebody with you when you go for a swim or a paddle or on a boat or a float. And next time you go sit by the water or sit by a fountain, just take someone with you and talk about it. And it might be the thing that helps them the most this year. And so that +1 aspect is really, a strong part of my message these days, because people are languishing for a variety of reasons, or post-pandemic politics, economics, wars, conflict, all kinds of stressors. And if it's such a gift to find something that makes you feel at ease and creative and connected. So get someone, take them with you, and go hang out by some water.
Yeah, absolutely. Something so simple and instantaneous that helps you and maybe +1 person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's the move from the me to the we. A lot of the things I see lately that help people reduce anxiety and stress, and they're very individualistic, and that's good. I'm glad people are taking care of themselves. But I find that when you move from me to we, when you take the thing and you have somebody join you who needs it, it works for you even better, but it helps them. And it's a big shift, not just self-help, always about yourself, but moving to the we, the +1 or +3 if you can.
Yeah, you're right, because we all talking about self-realization. So I think from me to we is it's a good goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Nichols, and I hope we all get our blue mind on. Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.